The first time James raised his voice to me, it wasn't a shout. It was a growl, low and sharp, like something wounded and cornered. But it sank its teeth in deeper than any scream ever could. And by the time his hands followed, I was already numb to the idea that my own son, my baby boy, had become a stranger. I am 70 years old. My bones ache with every sunrise, and my skin wears the history of a life both ordinary and hard-lived. I survived the death of my husband, the slow erosion of friendships, the quiet of retirement. But nothing prepared me for the fear I'd feel in my own home. Not at this age. Not from my own flesh and blood. James came back to live with me after his divorce, carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a mouth full of bitterness. He'd lost his job 6 months before that, and the weight of his failure seemed to have fused with his spine, always hunched, always tense. I welcomed him in without question. What mother wouldn't? In the beginning, he stayed in the guest room and helped around the house. He was quiet, withdrawn, but polite. But within weeks, his silence grew cold. He never hit hard, not at first. A shove when I asked if he was okay. A door slammed too close to my face. Then a grabbed wrist. A twisted arm. Pain. Yes, but worse than the pain was the shame. The disbelief. How do you tell someone that the son you once sang lullabies to now treats you like an enemy? I told no one. Not the neighbors. Not the church ladies who sometimes stopped by with pie. Not even Mary, my best friend since high school, who called every Sunday like clockwork. What would I say? That I couldn't control my own child? That I was too afraid to kick him out? James always apologized afterward, not with words, but with gestures. He'd clean the kitchen, replace a broken plate. Once, he even bought me flowers, as if the petals could cover the bruises on my collarbone. I convinced myself that he was just going through something, that it wasn't really him, that if I just held on a little longer, the son I knew would come back. But people don't always come back. Sometimes they stay lost. The worst night wasn't the night he hit me the hardest. It was the night he didn't hit me at all. Just stood there, eyes glassy from whiskey, breathing heavy. I was sitting on the floor of the hallway, my back against the wall, my hips screaming in pain from a fall I couldn't remember. He stared at me like I wasn't even there. Then he turned around and walked out the front door. He was gone for 2 days. I stayed in bed, barely eating, barely moving. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. Every silence felt like a threat. And when he finally came back, he didn't say a word. Just dropped his coat on the floor and sat on the couch like nothing had happened. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to beg him to leave. But instead, I made him dinner. I don't know how many weeks passed after that. Time blurs when you live in fear. You start measuring days and how much they hurt. Some were better than others. Some I only cried once. Some I didn't cry at all. That felt like a victory. But the body keeps the score. My hands, once so steady, began to tremble. My back ached constantly. I lost weight without meaning to. And still, I stayed silent. Still, I hoped. Until the knock came. It was a Friday. I remember because the mailman always came late on Fridays, and I'd just finished watching my midday show when the knock echoed through the house. 3 soft taps. Polite. Unassuming. But somehow, they cut through the thick quiet like a flare in the dark. James was asleep, passed out, really on the couch, snoring. A beer bottle had slipped from his hand onto the carpet. I stepped over it and made my way to the door, careful not to wake him. When I opened it, I didn't expect to see her. A young woman, no older than 30, clipboard in hand, wearing a blue jacket with a logo I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Evans?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I'm from Senior Outreach Services. We received an anonymous call about potential elder abuse. Would you mind if we talked for a moment?" Elder abuse. The words hit me like a slap, not from James this time, but from the world outside. Someone knew. Someone saw. And suddenly, the weight I'd been carrying alone began to shift. "I don't think," I began, but my voice cracked. The woman's expression didn't change. She just waited. I glanced behind me. James hadn't moved. And I heard myself say, "Come in." That moment, that single act of letting her step into my home, changed everything. I didn't know it then. I still thought I'd take it all back. That I'd protect him, as I always had. But the truth was out now. And truth, once spoken, doesn't go quietly. She didn't judge. She didn't prod. Just asked simple questions. Wrote down answers. Made gentle observations. When she noticed the bruise on my arm, she didn't gasp or pity me. She just said, "Would you like a doctor to take a look at that?" And I nodded again, because suddenly it felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone anymore. James never woke up during the visit, and when the social worker left, she gave me a card with her name on it. "Call anytime," she said, "even just to talk." That night, I sat in bed with the card in my hand, turning it over, reading the name, Elena Martinez, a stranger who had looked me in the eye and seen a woman, not a problem, who spoke to me like I mattered, like I was more than what my son had reduced me to. The next morning, I called her, and that was the beginning of the end. I didn't sleep much that night after calling Elena. My mind spun like a washing machine stuck on the same cycle. Guilt, fear, shame all bubbling together with a strange new feeling I hadn't felt in years. Hope. She picked up after 2 rings. "Mrs. Evans," she said gently, as though she already knew I'd call. "I think I need help," I whispered. "To think I've needed it for a long time." "You're not alone," she said. "I'm proud of you for calling. We can help you. You deserve to be safe." No one had said that to me in years, maybe decades. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, tears falling down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from the slow release of pressure I hadn't even realized I was under. That call marked the first step out of the prison I had been living in. She asked if I was safe in that moment. I told her James was asleep and wouldn't be up for hours. "Can we come by again tomorrow?" she asked. "I'd like to bring a medical advocate and someone from our legal team." "Legal?" I repeated, stomach twisting. "Only if you're ready," she said. "It's your choice. Every step of this will be on your terms." It struck me then how long it had been since I was allowed to choose anything. My meals, my sleep, my comfort, even my own voice had been swallowed up under the weight of fear. "Yes," I said. "Come tomorrow." That morning, I cooked breakfast like I always did. Scrambled eggs, burnt toast, black coffee. James liked it that way. I still moved carefully around him, like tiptoeing past a dog you aren't sure will bite. He didn't thank me. He rarely did. He sat at the table in his usual robe, thumbing through his phone with that permanent scowl on his face. I glanced at the bruises on my arm, now turning yellow, and made sure to keep my sleeves pulled low. "I might have visitors later," I said lightly, stirring my coffee. He looked up, suspicious. "Who?" "Just someone from the senior center." I lied. "Checking on wellness. Routine stuff." He grunted. "Tell them I'm not interested." "They're not here for you," I said quietly. He gave me a look, cold, assessing. But he didn't ask more. Just shoved eggs into his mouth and went back to scrolling. It wasn't until the next afternoon that they came. Elena arrived first. Her presence filled the room like warm sunlight, calm, steady. With her was a nurse named Joanne and a quiet man named Derek who introduced himself as a legal advocate for elder rights. This time, James was awake. He sat in the recliner, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Elena turned to me. "Shall we talk in private?" I looked at James. He narrowed his eyes but didn't move. "We'll talk here," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "He can hear it." I felt the entire room shift. Elena nodded. "Of course, if that's what you want." Joanne moved toward me, asking gently if she could take a look at the bruises. I hesitated, then rolled up my sleeve. She took notes, examined gently, asked questions I couldn't answer without tears forming. James didn't say a word, but he didn't leave either. Derek explained the options: temporary protective orders, safe houses for seniors, legal pathways if I wanted to reclaim financial control or remove James from the property. "I don't want him to go to jail," I said suddenly, shocking myself. Elena looked at me softly. "Our goal is to protect you, not punish. But we can't ignore what's happening." "What's happened?" "I just want to feel safe again," I whispered. That's when James stood up. "This is insane," he snapped. "You're blowing everything out of proportion. I've been helping her. She's old. She forgets things. I've taken care of everything since I moved in." Joanne stood, shielding me subtly. Derek stepped forward, calm but firm. "No one is accusing you of anything illegal right now," he said. "But this conversation is about her safety, not your comfort." James sneered. "You're all vultures." And then he turned to me. "You really called these people?" His voice dropped. "After everything I've done for you?" "I called because I'm scared of you," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. "And I don't want to be scared anymore." The room fell silent. James stormed out, slamming the front door behind him. I didn't flinch. Elena stayed behind after the others left. She helped me fill out paperwork, schedule a doctor's visit, arrange a meeting with a local therapist who specialized in abuse recovery. She promised me resources I hadn't known existed. "You were very brave today," she said, as she prepared to leave. "This isn't the end, but it's the beginning of something better." After she left, the house felt different. Quieter, but not in that tense way. It felt like the house had exhaled, like it was waiting to become something safe again. That night, James didn't come home. I locked the doors for the first time in months. I slept through the night. Days passed. There were follow-up visits, medical evaluations, official statements filed. I told the truth not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed peace. I even admitted to the parts one was ashamed of, the times I defended him, the times I let it happen, the times I blamed myself. "You survived," my therapist told me. "That's nothing to be ashamed of." I started writing again, small things at first. Letters to myself. Notes to Mary, whom I finally called after months of silence. She cried when I told her what had been going on. "I thought you were just busy," she said. "I'm so sorry, Alice. I should have known." "No," I said. "This wasn't on you. I was hiding. I thought I had to." She drove up the next weekend with a pie in hand and a hug so tight it brought tears to my eyes. We sat in the garden for hours, catching up on the life I'd been too afraid to live. I got stronger. Slowly, but noticeably. The bruises faded. My appetite returned. I started walking in the mornings, breathing in fresh air like it was something sacred. I even painted the guest room no longer a space of dread, but maybe a room for visitors again. Maybe grandkids. One day, if James ever got the help he needed. He never came back to the house. I heard from his ex-wife once, through a carefully worded email. She said she wasn't surprised, that she had lived with that temper for years, that she was proud of me for speaking out. "Maybe you did what I couldn't," she wrote. "Maybe now he'll finally face it." I don't know what the future holds for James. I don't know if he'll ever be the boy I once cradled in my arms, who loved bedtime stories and jelly sandwiches and held my hand too tight when crossing the street. I've made peace with that uncertainty. But I do know this. No one, not a parent, not a spouse, not a child, deserves to live in fear. Love does not excuse cruelty, and silence only feeds the darkness. Help knocked on my door, and I let it in. That decision saved my life. In the days after James left, I wandered my own home like it was a museum I hadn't visited in years. Everything felt strange. The silence, once heavy and oppressive, now seemed soft, gentle. I could hear birds outside again. I could hear myself breathing. One afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom and really looked at myself. Not the quick glances I'd given in passing, checking that my bruises were hidden. Not the shameful glimpses that turned away too fast. I really looked. The woman staring back at me looked tired. Her cheeks had hollowed, her eyes sunken with age and strain. But there was a spark there, something stubborn, something alive. For the first time in a long while, I smiled at her. "You're still here," I whispered. There were still shadows. Trauma doesn't vanish because the abuser walks out the door. I jumped at sudden sounds. I checked the locks more than once every night. I kept expecting him to come back, to barge in yelling, accusing, making me feel small again. But each day that passed without him became proof that freedom was real. I started attending a support group through the center Elena referred me to. At first, I was terrified. What if I didn't belong? What if my story wasn't enough? What if I had failed too badly to deserve help? But the moment I walked in, I knew I was in the right place. There were others like me. Older women. A few men. Some wore sunglasses inside. Others carried canes. Most spoke softly, like they were still trying to shrink their voices after years of being silenced. The first time I shared my story, I couldn't stop shaking. My hands trembled. My throat went dry. But when I finished, the woman beside me took my hand. And another woman said, "You're so brave." And the man across the circle nodded, tears in his eyes. I wasn't alone. And I wasn't weak. One day, after group, I stayed behind with Elena. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Of course." "Why do people stay? Why did I stay so long?" She didn't answer right away. She let the question breathe. "Because you were surviving," she said at last. "Because we're wired to love our children, even when they hurt us. Because hope is a powerful thing. And sometimes because it's safer to stay than to risk being alone." "But I was already alone," I whispered. Elena nodded. "I know. But now you're not." I think that was the moment I truly began to forgive myself. One morning, weeks later, I woke up and realized I hadn't cried in 2 days. It hit me with the same weight as a confession. Not because I didn't feel grief, I did, but because for the first time in years, joy had found a crack to slip through. I baked a cake. Nothing fancy, just a small chocolate cake with too much frosting and a slightly burned bottom. But I made it because I wanted to. Not because I had to feed someone else. Not because it was expected, but because I wanted to celebrate that I was still here. Mary came over that afternoon, and we had coffee on the back porch. We ate cake and talked about nothing important. The weather, her new cat, the neighbor's strange obsession with trimming hedges at night. I haven't laughed like this in ages, she said. Me neither, I replied. She looked at me, then reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she said. You saved yourself. I don't think I ever believed I'd hear those words. I'd spent so long seeing myself as broken, damaged. But that day, I believed her. I felt something strong beneath my skin, something unshakable, like roots digging deep into the ground. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was healing. A few days after that, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. I almost didn't open it. But something in me said, face it. It was from James. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I barely understand what I did myself. But I'm in a program now. Court-ordered anger management. They say part of recovery is facing what you've done. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know that doesn't matter. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. And I understand if you never want to see me again. I hope you're safe. James. I read it twice. Then a third time. And I cried not from pain, not from fear, but from the ache of finally letting go. Not of him, but of the guilt that had tied me to him for too long. I didn't write back. I don't know if I ever will. Forgiveness is not permission. It's not erasure. It's not pretending something didn't happen. For me, forgiveness is the quiet decision to stop carrying a weight I never deserved in the first place. One morning, months later, I stood in my garden with a mug of warm tea, breathing in the scent of lavender and damp earth. A butterfly landed on the fence post, wings trembling in the breeze. And I thought, this is peace. Not loud, not perfect, but real. My body still carries the marks of what I went through. My back aches when it rains. My wrists are weaker than they once were. My heart, too, has scars. But I'm here. I'm free. I'm 70 years old, and I'm just beginning to live again. Some nights, I still dream of the hallway. It's always the same. I'm standing barefoot on the cold wooden floor, holding a plate of dinner in trembling hands. The lights are dim. James stands in the shadows, his eyes unreadable, his voice like gravel in the dark. Why do you always ruin everything? I can never speak in the dream. My mouth opens, but nothing comes out. And then I wake, heart racing, fingers clutching the bedsheet, as if the fear had soaked into my skin and refused to let go. I've spoken about these dreams in therapy. My counselor, Mara, says they're normal. That trauma lives not just in memory, but in the body. That I have to retrain my nervous system to understand I am safe now. Your body is still protecting you, she says gently. It just hasn't caught up to the present. At 70, I never thought I'd be learning how to feel safe again. 3 months after James left, the district attorney's office contacted me. They were moving forward with a restraining order on my behalf. There was enough medical documentation, enough testimony from the outreach team, and even security footage from a neighbor's door camera that caught James yelling outside my house one night. You don't have to attend the hearing, they told me. We can file everything without you. But I did attend. I wore my Sunday best not for vanity, but for dignity. I wanted to walk into that courtroom not as a victim, but as a survivor, as a mother reclaiming the space that had been taken from her. James didn't look at me when I walked in. His lawyer did all the talking. I sat still, hands folded, heart thudding in my chest like a war drum. When they asked if I had anything I wanted to say, I stood. And I spoke. I don't hate my son, I said, but I do fear him. And I know that love does not mean allowing myself to be hurt. I looked at James then, really looked. I raised you to be better than this, I said. But I will not carry the burden of your choices anymore. He flinched, just a little, but it was enough. The judge granted the restraining order without hesitation. 6 months, renewable. No contact. No approach within 200 feet. If he violated it, he'd go straight to jail. I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I had in years. Mary met me outside with her arms open. You did it, she whispered. You really did it. I cried on her shoulder in the parking lot. But this time, it wasn't from sadness. It was from relief. In the months that followed, I kept rebuilding. I joined a watercolor class at the senior center, just 6 of us in a small sunny room with cracked windows and the scent of linseed oil. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but there was joy in the messiness. Color, texture, life. I painted wildflowers and stormy skies. I painted a small piece titled Before Silence, full of broken lines and dark grays. Mara asked me if I was expressing anger. Maybe, I said, but also survival. The women in the group welcomed me like family. We exchanged stories over paper towels and sips of coffee. Some of them had never been through what I had. Some had lived worse. All of us had known what it meant to feel invisible. And together, we began to remember how to be seen again. One afternoon, I received another letter, this time from a halfway house where James had checked into a longer-term program. The envelope was plain, the writing neat. Mom, I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know I haven't earned it. I'm writing because they say I should write things down, even if they never get answered. I remember the way you used to sing when you cooked. How you'd hum that song, the one from that old movie, and tap the spoon on the counter in rhythm. I haven't heard music in a long time. I think maybe I shut it out. I want you to know I'm trying. I can't undo anything. But I see it now. All of it. I hope one day you'll be able to remember me without fear. James. I read it once and placed it in a drawer. Not out of coldness, but because healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes, it means holding boundaries with love. Sometimes, it means letting the past remain in the past. That winter, the house felt full again, not with people, but with presence. I decorated for Christmas. Just a little. A small tree, a wreath on the door, a string of lights that flickered like soft stars in the living room. Mary came over with hot cider. We watched an old holiday movie and laughed at the terrible acting. You're glowing, she said, handing me a blanket. I feel alive, I replied. It felt strange to say that at 70, not in the nostalgic way people mean it, but in the real way. Like every cell in my body had been holding its breath for years and was finally exhaling. I had my first full physical in 5 years. My blood pressure was better. My appetite had returned. I even started doing simple yoga stretches in the mornings. Slowly, I was reintroducing myself to my own body, one breath at a time. One particularly windy evening, I received a knock on the door. My heart froze. It was a reflex, like a buried instinct snapping awake. I stepped slowly to the peephole. It wasn't James. It was Elena. She smiled when I opened the door. I was just in the neighborhood. Thought I'd say hello. I welcomed her in and made us tea. She looked around the house, noting the changes, the brighter curtains, the new books on the shelves, the watercolor framed on the wall. You've come so far, she said. I still have a long way to go. She nodded. But you're walking it. That matters. We sat in quiet for a while, sipping tea. Eventually, I asked her something that had been circling in my mind for weeks. Do you think people like him can really change? She took a long breath. I think people can change, but they have to want it deeply, painfully, and consistently. And even then, it doesn't mean the damage disappears. I nodded slowly. I still dream about him, I admitted. Not the man he is now, but the boy he used to be. The one who brought me dandelions and cried when he lost his toy car. That version of him was real, she said. But so is the man he became. We didn't say much after that. But her presence, calm, grounded, was its own answer. Spring came quietly, with the scent of jasmine in the garden and the soft hum of bees near the fence. I planted tomatoes for the first time in years. My knees ached from kneeling, but I didn't mind. There was something healing in the soil, something patient about the way roots take hold. One afternoon, while watering the garden, I looked up at the sun and smiled without realizing it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was truly, finally living. The year turned slowly, one golden afternoon at a time. The pain that used to live in my bones no longer controlled my every step, though it never disappeared. Healing didn't mean I stopped remembering. It meant that remembering didn't break me anymore. By June, my tomatoes had started to ripen. They weren't perfect, some too small, others oddly shaped, but they were mine. Grown from my own hands, under my own roof. It felt like a kind of proof that life could grow again, even after it had been trampled. One evening, I got a call from the center. Elena was being transferred a promotion to a regional role. She would be managing programs across the state. She wanted to say goodbye in person. When she arrived, we sat on the porch with lemonade. The air was heavy with summer heat, and cicadas hummed in the trees. She looked at me with such warmth in her eyes. "I didn't rescue you," she said. "You did that yourself." "I know," I replied. "But you reminded me I could." She left with a hug and a promise to keep in touch. And though I knew I'd miss her, I didn't feel lost. Not like before. I had found something inside myself I didn't know was still there, the will to live. Not just survive. To live. Later that summer, I got another letter. This one I didn't expect. It wasn't from James. It was from his daughter, my granddaughter, Lila. We hadn't seen each other since she was a toddler. She was 13 now. "Dear Grandma, Mom told me about everything. She said she didn't want to keep me in the dark anymore. I'm sorry I didn't know what you were going through. I think about you a lot. I remember the strawberry pancakes you made, and the song you used to hum when you did the dishes. I hope you're okay. I'd really like to see you again someday. Love, Lila." I read it sitting at the kitchen table, tears sliding down my cheeks. It was a child's handwriting, careful and slanted, and it broke my heart in the most unexpected way. I thought I had let go of everything tied to James. But here was this thread, this innocent, unbroken part of the story asking to be acknowledged. I didn't respond right away. I folded the letter and placed it beside the old photo albums. I wanted to answer. I just didn't know how yet. So I gave myself time. And when I was ready, I wrote back. "Dear Lila, thank you for your letter. It means more to me than you'll ever know. I think of you often too. I remember your laugh and the way you used to name all the birds in the garden. I'm doing better now. Life is peaceful, quiet in the best way. I'd love to see you again when the time is right. With love always, Grandma Alice." I mailed it the next morning, hands steady for the first time in weeks. By fall, I had joined a neighborhood gardening club. It wasn't anything formal, just a group of us who swapped cuttings and compost tips and met at each other's homes once a month. But it brought me joy. We talked about seeds and soil and sun exposure, about birds and squirrels and the stubbornness of weeds. I laughed more than I thought I would, and not once did I feel like I had to hide a part of myself. One afternoon, during a club meeting in my backyard, a woman named Jean complimented my rosemary bush. "You must have a gift," she said. "That plant looks like it's been loved." And I realized then that she was right. I had been learning how to love again. The house, the garden, my friendships, myself. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, earned, steady. That winter, I decided to do something bold. I booked a trip, just a small one, nothing extravagant. A 2-day retreat at a lakeside bed and breakfast 2 hours away. Alone. I'd never traveled by myself before. Not really. There was always someone to tend to, someone to carry. But this time, it was just me. The room was simple white walls, a view of the water, a little fireplace crackling in the corner. I took long walks along the frozen shore. I read books by the window. I sipped tea and watched the sky change colors. The quiet didn't scare me anymore. On the second night, I wrote in my journal, "You are not the worst thing that happened to you. You are the woman who lived, who rose, who dared to begin again." When I returned, there was a card waiting for me in the mailbox. From Lila. "Grandma, I got your letter. I'm so happy. My school is doing a Grandparents' Day this spring. If you feel okay coming, I'd love that. But if not, I understand. I just want you to know I'm proud you're my grandma. Love, Lila." I held that card against my heart. There was grief in it for the time lost, for the distance James had created between us. But there was hope too. And I'd learned that hope is a powerful thing. In early spring, I took the bus down to the city and stood at the back of Lila's school auditorium, nervous as a leaf in the wind. Rows of grandparents sat in folding chairs, some clutching flowers, others with cameras. I stood alone. And then I saw her. She turned, spotted me, and her face lit up like a sunrise. She ran down the aisle and hugged me so hard I had to catch my breath. "You came," she whispered. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said. That day, I watched her read a poem on stage about resilience, about roots, about growing through storms. She looked at me when she said the last line. And still I rise. After the assembly, we walked in the park, just the two of us. She told me about school, about books she loved, about how her mom was doing better these days. Then she paused. "Do you think Dad will ever get better?" she asked. I took a long breath. "I hope so," I said. "I believe people can change if they want to. But whether or not they do, that's not your fault. And it's not your job to fix it." She nodded. Did you love him? She asked suddenly. I still do, I said honestly. But I had to choose myself. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she reached for my hand and held it tight. That night, back home, I sat on the porch under a sky full of stars. The wind was warm for spring. I watched the garden sway in the dark, living, breathing, growing. I thought of everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. My body, though weary, was still strong. My voice, once silenced, now carried truth. My heart, though bruised, had never stopped beating. I had been hurt, but I had not been broken. And I knew with a certainty that lived deep in my chest that help had not just come knocking that day. I had opened the door, and I had walked through it.